Alright guys, that video there is the process I go through to sharpen one. Now I'm going to show you what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. See these little marker here? This is the end of the file. Well, there's no confusion. I'm going to go through it pretty quick and be straightforward, and I'm not going to repeat myself. I usually repeat myself a ton. So, look, the depth of the file and how deep you are in the gullet really determines more the longevity of the cutter, not really the sharpness, because they're both going to be sharp. And I'm going to show you right here. This is how you need to be with a cutter. Your file needs to come just till it starts to round over the file. Your cutter just till it starts to round over, not on top of it. If you go down too deep and it starts to come over top of it, your top plate gets too thin right here, and it'll look like this. It'll be razor sharp, but it'll fold over like this after just a few cuts because it's so thin. So all you're doing is creating a plane for your top plate cutter. Your top plate cutter, all it is a chisel, like a plane. Like, have you ever heard of a planer, or you run through wood through a planer? Well, they have chisels like this in there. They don't have big old thin razor edge chisels. All chain is an industrial planer. So the depth of the file really doesn't determine how fast the saw is cutting, or how it kind of does when out on how sharp it is. But I'll get into that in just a second. But the depth of the file and getting your top plate sharp really determines the longevity of your cutter and how long it stays sharp, not really the sharpness and how fast it cuts. How fast it cuts really is determined by your rakers. And I'll get into that, because you got to maintain chain speed, and you can fine tune your rakers to the saw to maintain that chain speed, and no matter what wood, and I'll show you how to do that. So we don't want this, because it's sharp, but it's just gonna fold over and be dull. Okay, saying that, um, your you really need to know the difference between a dull tooth and a sharp tooth. That is dull. So if your top plate is nice and straight, and your working corner is nice and straight, that's good. But whenever your working corner gets where it's round, like that, because you'll see that a lot, that's not good. It needs to be perfectly square. And then a lot of times it'll be square, but have just a little, the edge right here will shine. The edge will be shiny. That's where it's rolled over like this, like that. That is this. Whenever the top plate edge, the cutter edge rolls over, it'll look like that. It'll be shiny. It may still be nice and square. Your working corner may be nice, but the edge is rolled over, so it's not really cutting as good as it should. This right here, on a chisel, full chisel chain, this right here will not cut. As far as letting the saw cut, you can put pressure on the saw and make it work, but it's not the right way to do it. You gotta really let your saws work. Don't put pressure on them. Pressure is heat. Heat will dull your chains. So, and there's a lot of stuff to it. And then again, whenever you're making your stroke, like in my video, make sure you do smooth, because this is your chainsaw. This is your file right here. It just kind of, the pattern just swirls up. If you go really smooth, you're gonna get a really smooth finish on that tooth, and there's gonna be so much less drag on the tooth if you do really smooth strokes versus a dirty, hard pushing stroke. So you want that file to cut. If the file's not really cutting, you have to put pressure on it. It's gonna leave a really rough finish. And the difference is this: imagine grabbing your son by the feet and dragging him across a nice hardwood floor, really piece of glass, something that's really smooth, even across a kitchen floor. Then set him down on a piece of concrete and try to drag him across the concrete. The resistance is is huge. Especially whenever you get a 24-inch bar, 28-inch bar, 32-inch bar. Whenever you get that saw in big wood, there's so much more resistance there, and you can fix that and give the saw a little bit more cutting speed to maintain your chain speed by having really smooth strokes on your files. All this little stuff helps. All this stuff will take your saw from cutting good to better to even better than great. So I mean, these little things, if you do it, you can get the most out of your chain. I'm talking go from 12 seconds out of a box chain down to 9 seconds. I mean, I'm talking about 3 or 4 seconds faster in cutting just by. I mean, I'm talking about a new chain, a new out of the box. You can make it cut 4 seconds faster by fine tuning it and get some nice smooth strokes on it and really know what you're doing. So there's at 6 minutes. Now, what I want to talk to you about is the rakers. How to tune your saw. This is how you tune it. Bear with me just a second, because I got a little impatient there. I went ahead and hit my rakers on this saw. It ain't been ran yet. I just went ahead and hit them by waiting for that video to upload. And I left and went to help my boys. Okay. We seen the teeth, right? Everybody sees the teeth. I mean, they're on point. Okay, so saw is razor sharp. I just got done sharpening it, so when I sharpen it in the video. And this right here is how I fine tune the chain. I don't put these marks on here. I took 8 strokes off of this saw. If you guys remember, I took roughly 8 strokes and kept my teeth all the same. Look, a chainsaw needs to be turning in its peak RPM range. Everybody talks about torque, and it gets out more torque at 7,000 RPM. Well, 7,000 RPM is not going to cut fast because it's not maintaining chain speed. The RPMs is the chain speed, which is cuts fast. So you got to maintain chain speed. So the difference between, look, you take a raker gauge like this. This raker gauge sets the depth between the 2 teeth. So you set this across 2 teeth. This sets the rakers to these 2 teeth height. So therefore, the chain is going to be kind of uniform. It's going to, one tooth may be a little lower or higher, but not very much if you keep and maintain. But if you use the other raker gauges that do each individual tooth, one tooth may not even cut because it's set so far below the other teeth. So doing it this way, you always have your cutters cutting. And then don't forget, after you set your raker gauges with a raker gauge, you need to go back and hit your teeth 1 or 2 strokes, because it'll, whenever you set it on here, look, the highest point of this tooth is the working corner. That's the highest point. So whenever you set these raker gauges on here and you start filing, whenever you start hitting it, what you're doing is rounding this working corner over. So you need to go back and hit 1 or 2 strokes on it and get it back into perfect condition. I mean, I'm a weirdo. I'm so tedious about that. So after you get done sharpening it and set your, I don't even really use these much. If I destroy a chain, I'll get them set back to 25 thousandths. But look, most chains don't like 25 thousandths. Most saws don't. Some like 35, some like 40. You know, because you got regular gauges set them at 50. And then here in this hardwood, there's not a saw really going to cut at its peak performance with the raker set at 50,000. This is not going to happen. I mean, in softwood, you can do it in softwood. I mean, a lot of softwood settings are like that because it's, you know, way different, totally different worlds. So this is what I do. Like 1 full stroke on this is roughly 30 thousandths. I've done it 10,000 times. So what I do is, this saw likes, you know, 35 thousandths, something like that. So what I'll do is I'll pinch the file right here like that, and then I'll go, like if I'm filing, I'll go from on my raker gauge, I'll just go from here to there. That's my full stroke, is from here to there. That's all I'll put on my, just like that. Just one stroke from where I'll butt my finger up to the bar and come over, and that's gonna give me 5 thousandths on this to keep it maintained, to keep it fine tuned, because you want the saw to stay in the 11,000 RPM range. Because you got, look, you take this saw and set it at 25 thousandths, like my 585s, brand new chain, hand filed. Then you set the regular to 25 thousandths. With my 585, it'll be blubbering and stuttering, and it'll be hitting the rev limiter. It's four stroking almost all the time. The 585, it likes 40 thousandths in hardwood. It's always unbelievable. But anyway, you got a range to fine tune this saw in, from a blubbery um, a blubbery four stroke to about 9,000 RPMs. From 9,000 to 45, 14,000 RPMs. You can fine tune that saw in there. 14,000 usually means it's not cutting. So 9,000 means it's way too aggressive. So you need to stay in 11, 5, 10, 5, 11, depending on how long bar you're running. But you need to really stay in the 10, 5, 11 range. And you do that with this. And that's the saw cutting. That's you setting the saw down there, pulling the trigger, and letting it run down. That's not working the saw over and back. Because working the saw over, if you have to work the saw over to get it to cut, it's not sharp. If you're having to work the saw, it's not sharp. If you have to work it at all, whether wood's 20 inches, 40 inches, whatever. I know some bar, if you got a 38 piece of wood and a 40-inch bar, and you have to work the saw back and forth, it's not working. Period. It's not sharp. So look, a couple different reasons you want to stay in 11 grand range. For one, the saw is going to keep oiling good. It's going to expel the chips. You're going to have a nice, smooth, oily chain. The RPM is going to stay up, and you're reducing the drag, the resistance on it. You don't have no chain stretch. There's so much better to not try to run it at 9 grand aggressive, and it bogging and hanging up every time you let off the trigger. So maintaining chain speed is the key to cutting fast. So, and the way you do that is by fine tuning your chain. So I got 4 or 5 marks on here. So if I take 16 strokes off of here, I'll go about a half a file and get it back to where it's sweet spot is. Every saw, I know where they need to be. I run these saws every day. So if I took 16 strokes off here, I'd put a half a stroke over my file in there to get it back to where it needs to be. But I keep everything uniform. I keep everything to where it's predictable and it's manageable. You know what I'm saying? So if something's not right, I know what's not right. Because if all the teeth are the same length and all the regulars are always like them, and the saw's not happy, there's maybe the bar needs to be cleaned up, or there's other issue there somewhere. So always be deliberate with everything you're doing. Know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Don't do nothing just because. Ever in your life. I mean, love passionately, love with a purpose. Everything you do, have a purpose behind it. Every knot you make, every knot you tie in a rope, every knot you make in a tree, have a deliberate purpose. Don't put a conventional knot in it just because that's what these people in this area use as conventional. You put a conventional knot in one because that's how you want it to come off the stump. You want it to come off the stump a certain way. You want it to release. And that's a totally different story. Sorry. See, I ramble so much because there's so much I can share with you. But, period. Back to what we was talking about, period. The end of the story. The depth of the file determines the longevity of the cutter more so than it does the sharpness. Because they're both very sharp. Both. Recap. Both this one and this one are very sharp. You do not want the file. You do not want the file or the file that deep on your cutter. It's way too thin. It's sharp, but it'll dull fast. This is sharp and it'll last 5 or 6 cord of wood. I promise you. It's gonna last. And then make sure you make really nice smooth strokes. And then on your top plate, make sure you know, if you don't know what's dull, if you don't know what to look for as how to know if your top plate's sharp, not as far as the depth, but what the nasty to ugly to get off. If you don't know what to look for, there's images of it, and I can probably post some images of all the different scenarios. Because if you hit a rock, sometimes I've hit rocks, and it'll sometimes it'll fold the cutter over. It'll fold the cutter over like this, and you can make it look perfectly sharp, but it's not cutting good because the top plate is bent. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios that can keep us all from cutting good, but really, I mean, you need to make sure your cutter is at a really nice, perfect angle. Like I said, the shiny is usually mean it's dull. If the working corner is shiny or the edge is shiny, the shiny is usually where it's rolled over and it's dull. So, and then, like I said, make sure you keep your saw finely tuned to the razor. What's 16 minutes? Lord have mercy. Okay, that's pretty much how I tune a saw. I mean, you guys seen this one? I've done to hit the records on it. I put a quarter stroke on it. So if you want, I can take this saw and we can make a cut and see how it cuts, and I'll show you. There's plenty of hardwood out here. I got some pine, so it doesn't really matter to me. Let me. There's so much more to this stuff than this. This is just the tooth itself. This is just a cutter. There's a lot of other stuff that you need to do to make the saw last, the cutter stay sharper longer also. And it's how the way you tighten your saw bars and chains. It's how you work your saw. It's the oil. There's a lot to it. And I'll make another video and show you guys exactly what's going on when you're cutting.